Okay, welcome back to Chess on the Brain, and we're live. So it's been a while. I haven't really had the chance to stream recently, and I guess because of this whole coronavirus thing, and kind of had us all at home and being on the internet all the time. So I ended up doing a bunch of online lessons and getting back into doing internet things. So yeah, I hope you guys are all healthy, doing well. And in the meantime, I'm going to catch them on my YouTube video. So this is a game I've been meaning to do for a while. It was a couple months ago in the DC Chess League. I had this tough game where, it was this question around when to push the kingside pawns, right? Because it's tempting to push the pawns, right? We all have those moments where, those lines against the Sicilian where you want to play, G4, G4, H4, or, those bayonet attacks. And you often get these glorious attacks with kingside pawn thrusts, right? And as you can see, we have here G4, G5 has been achieved. So, or achieved, or if it works out well anyway. But this happened, right? So technically this should be good. As you can see, actually it might be blocked out, but it says plus 0.8. So we'll take it with a grain of salt, but Stockfish thinks it's pretty good for white. I had the white pieces against an opponent who was, yeah, he was a couple hundred points lower rated than me, but you got, a young player, up and coming high schooler. So you can't put too much weight on the rating. He's very sharp. And once he had his moment, he struck, right? But in itself, playing G4, G5, it should have been actually the right way to go, it turns out. But you have to be really careful. It's a very delicate situation when you do choose to push those kingside pawns. Now, of course, I wanted to lock in with f4. I wanted to achieve f4. Ideally, not even let that knight get into g3. Just keep that knight cooped up on h5, kind of corral it, because we've doubled his pawns. Yeah, it gives him just to kind of evaluate the position a little bit before we get into the tactics. So yeah, those doubled pawns, it was smart the way he took actually away from the center, because that's where he's got action on the F file, right? And that, as it turns out, worked really well for him in this game. Um, but the doubled pawns, in this case, they restrict the knight. Now that we have the knight on G, right, rather the pawn on G5, these are all locked up. So where's the knight to go, right? He's stuck on H5. So yeah, it should be a difficult situation for my opponent, but again, I have to play it precisely. Now, things started to go the wrong direction when I played bishop to f3. Okay, which seems like a pretty reasonable move. I mean, I'm going after the knight on h5. I figure, hey, maybe I could, if nothing else, win a pawn, because that knight's got nowhere to go. Again, he's stranded on h5. If I really want to, I can go bishop takes h5, pawn takes, and queen takes h5. I figured I have lots of options here, but one thing to do is, okay, let's win a pawn. But ideally, I want to go for more of a positional, get a good bind on the position and just outplay him positionally. So that was the idea. But we'll come back to this. It turns out queen g4 was much stronger, and I would have had a pretty solid advantage at that point had I played it correctly. But again, that's this kind of, as I'm getting into this kind of tightrope you're walking. When you push those kingside pawns, sometimes it's a great attack or you tie them down, and other times they just come back, they strike at your position. I'm thinking in particular of Kasparov Petrosian. When was that? I forget the year, but Kasparov Petrosian, kind of toward the, I guess, closer to the end of Petrosian's career and earlier in Kasparov's career, where Kasparov ends up getting actually E3, F4, G5, and it just Kasparov was just overextended that game. So that's what ends up happening here. Now, after bishop F3, he doubles up here, and I played a move that I thought was pretty sensible. It seemed to make sense to me, and it just doesn't seem like my opponent has too much. I mean, of course, I was looking at things like bishop H2 check, and the thing is that it was kind of a psychological mistake because I had looked really carefully at some possibilities that he might have. I think I was looking at some sacrifice that he may have had, and I was like, okay, that doesn't work. And it kind of disarmed me a little bit to those possibilities. I mean, obviously, he's got a lot of kind of potential energy. You can see his queen and bishop aiming in here, and his rooks aiming here, and his knight hoping to hop in, and his other knight, we'll see about that, but it might come in soon enough. So there's a lot of potential energy in his position. It's just waiting to burst open. So I have to be really cautious in this kind of position. Now, I ended up playing this blunder, bishop to g4. and that allows a really cool combination. You might actually want to pause it and just think of it from black's perspective here. You might want to flip. You could flip the board, or I guess you never mind. You can't flip it from YouTube, but I guess I could flip the board for you. If I flip it, and so I'm used to doing those online lessons where with my students today. It's a little different for me, but it's been working out pretty well. And obviously, in those cases, you could both do a lot of different things with flipping the board and so forth. But so you have the board flipped around. Think about it from here. Now you see what the computer likes, this bishop check. So that might give you some ideas. But just think, pause it here, see if you could find something for black. Okay, we'll come back. So what does black have? What is this awesome line? I mean, it's just worth showing you in its own right. It's a very basic tactic, but it's something I overlooked in this case. So you got the bishop h2 check, and there's literally just nothing I could do. It's like face palm. You know, how could I have allowed this to happen? So I go king h1. Now, if I go king g2, I mean, obviously I want to guard the f2 pawn. But of course, why doesn't king g2 work? Again, you might want to pause it again if you hadn't looked at that possibility. Well, once again, okay, we have our suggestion from the computer, which says minus 24 for black. Minus 24 points. Okay, that's just over. I mean, it's basically going to be checkmate, pretty close to it. So if the rook takes back, then he has this awful move for me, an awesome move for him. Queen g3 check, I have to go back. If I go here, I get mated, so I have to go to h1. And then the rook comes in, and it's a mate in 5, actually. Yeah, there's... I have to play, or I have to play queen f1 otherwise to stave off mate. No, wow, he has queen g3 check because he has the knight coming in here. Amazing. And the queen blocks, it's pinned, and that's a mate. And of course, if the bishop takes, well, then he comes in here, and nice version of a smothered mate. I mean, complete domination by the black pieces, the rook, the knight, and the bishop, just completely dominating my king. And you can see that's just your classic overextended kingside. He's got no pawn cover other than h3, but he's beyond that. He's gotten through infiltrated. So really cool, just the basic combination is cool. Now, of course, it's so basic. How could I miss this? In the DC Chess League too, I've had a pretty good record. I had a nice streak of like 6 games. Then I had a couple of draws, and then this game. But overall, I've been pretty happy with it. But I just made this awful blunder. And again, it's kind of it's partially psychological because you think, okay, the bishop's in front of the queen. It doesn't look that scary. It doesn't seem like it could do that much. But it's more about the weakness of the g3 square. Actually, this kind of overloaded square. Like once you remove the f2 pawn, the queen infiltrates right behind the bishop, and it's just a perfect storm. And what was the line I was looking at? It was something with I just remember I was looking at some sacrifice like a move or two ago that involved bishop h2, and I think the rook sack or something. So I had literally looked at the same thing, but it was somehow that I thought I had it covered. Now it was I think it was when the bishop was still on g2. And at that point, I was thinking, okay, if he has like a check, anyway, that's just kind of a little bit of a backstory. But so it's a common psychological mistake, though, because I want to get into the psychological element here in this analysis. Because again, you're doing your analysis. You write something up so easily, right? You just look at something and say, okay, I've got that covered, and you kind of just put that on the back burner, and you focus on lines that seem more pertinent. But remember, if you're playing a really sharp variation, especially if you open up your king side, then tactics can happen, right? It's a tactical situation. You have to be on the lookout. So even if it didn't work a move ago, every move you've got to double check. Make sure that there's the basic checks, right? Bishop h2 check, some type of rook takes f2. Well, and the rooks aren't doubled yet, right? But once they're doubled, you can feel the power of their pieces bearing down on your king. Okay, obviously you've got to be super cautious. Okay, so that was a good psychological lesson, which hopefully you don't have to learn yourself too many times. Just remember, when you look at something once, I've done that before too. You look at something once, you kind of discount your analysis. It may not even be a big attack. It's just a certain line. You kind of push it aside. But yeah, you have to keep all the relevant kind of lines out in mind somehow. Just try not to forget them in your analysis. It's tricky, but again, it's just when you're playing a lot, it's experience. So bishop g4 is the blunder. Now, it turns out there were actually some saves. Even here, even after playing, after rook a to f8. No, actually, I think I could have still been okay had I done bishop takes h5, and he can toss in bishop check. I can go king h1. Now, obviously, I don't still. If I go to g2, then I'm still walking into rook takes f2 check, and that's awful because it's all coming with tempo, the gain of time for my opponent. So I got to try king h1. Okay, and then he does. Let's say he tries rook f2, hoping for something similar. But remember, we've removed the knight. The knight was an important ingredient in my opponent's attack. So, like in the art of defense of chess, one of the key things you want to do if you're under attack, okay, you remove the attacking pieces. Well, that knight was, it turned out, since I kind of messed it up, allowed this breakthrough on f2 where the knight becomes a monster on h5 and gets into g3. You do not want that to happen, right? So you get rid of it. And then simple chess. And then we can just run our bishop back to g4. And let's say let's say move the king, we take this one. A few different lines here. Maybe they go bishop g3, come in. And it still looks dangerous, but it turns out white's completely winning. I mean, white's just still retaining the piece because of queen g4, which would be forking this and this. So this bishop is essentially taboo. It doesn't do anything if they take it. Knight f8 then, still queen g4. And yeah, they can take on b2, we take on g3. So white remains a piece up. Yeah, it's a little dangerous, but a lot better than the previous version. Let's say, okay, the queen does an immediate infiltration, queen g3. Well, we just challenge the queen. I mean, that's pretty scary, right? They're about to mate. There's nothing here. The bishop still guards backward. But queen g2 is obviously something to be serious about, so we go queen g4, and they can take the d2, we take g3, and we just take on d7. And they could even come in f2. It looks a little scary still, but again, you got to be objective. Bishop takes, and we just move the bishop out of the way, and we emerge a piece up. Yeah, the pieces have infiltrated our position, but you know, it's going to take a little defense. But right now, Stockfish is saying plus 3.7, so white is at least a piece up. I mean, hey, it's an extra bishop, and I think white is going to either be able to activate the rook on the c file once this opens, or the f file, maybe even e4 break, but somehow that rook's going to activate and the extra piece is going to be felt soon enough. You're going to feel the impact. So yeah, that's one possibility, is bishop takes h5. What else do I have in the analysis? The immediate g takes h5, right? So even after this, now here's the key. Now this is actually something a little closer to what I had in mind. Again, I wanted to play f4 and restrict the knight. Okay, well, I may not get the best of what everything I wanted. Then I had to give up the bishop for the knight, but then I still get f4, and now it turns out that the bishop on h2 is trapped, and white is still effectively winning here. So bishop g3. So really, I mean, this could have. And I remember my opponent said after the game, he's like, "Yeah, I felt like you were about to win if anything else had happened." But so hey, it's that's kind of the poetry of chess, right? And when you do win, it's all the better. But once in a while, it's like you just laugh at yourself, like, "Hey, but this was my team at stake," so it's hard to laugh. But in terms of the game itself, you can laugh at yourself and say, hey, I've gotten wins myself that way. It's kind of chess karma, right? Sometimes you make dumb mistakes. Sometimes your opponent makes dumb mistakes. Happens to everybody once in a while. The idea is to minimize that minimize that. Try not to do it, but you got to laugh at ourselves sometimes. So queen takes h5. And the best it's coming up with here as a defense is just sack the bishop's going to fall, right? There's king, just bring the queen back, not there, here, I don't know, rook f3, just attack the bishop, and that bishop is stuck. So the bishop has to give itself up, a little desperado, to do some damage control. So what are we at? 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, it's just a pawn for a piece. And again, white's king is way open, right? But what do you do about it? I mean, there are resources. The reserves are there. Again, a little dangerous, but we're covering all the key squares on the diagonal. Just got to maybe cover g2, so we go queen e2. And the thing is, this knight is also really out of place. Okay, they take this, we get to take this, and as you can see, it's just there's no real. Okay, we could actually. It's amazing that It's just kind of a fun line to look at, one of those computer lines. But you can take this. And do we have to take on d7? I mean, I guess we could do something more defensive, but this is more direct because we don't want to give them time to do anything else. So we take, they take, and we immediately create that mating threat. Once you see that, you realize, okay, they have to defend. And I don't think g6 is going to work out too well for them. We basically just have to get our bishop in the game, and then eventually these dark squares are going to feel the heat. So that extra piece should really definitely have an impact there pretty quickly. So rook g8. Okay, well, I mean, if you make them, they need compensation. They need some activity. So if you make them move the rook to g8, well, okay, there's really no question about this. Rook, because I mean, anytime you're trying to win a piece, you know, your king's open. You should definitely second guess it, double check it. Don't just go headlong into that. But in this case, if you make them reduce their activity to their pieces, intuitively you can say, all right, I'm keeping my piece. And okay, this is a little tricky though, because there might be some checks. Make sure they don't have perpetual. But it's kind of nice because that extra piece is stopping the check on c1. And yeah, that's pretty much just that's all she wrote at that point. Queen f4 check, and well, it's a little tricks, right? But we got that nice queen retreat, and then we seal up the king side, or queen there, just to challenge the queen, and simultaneously stopping any checks, getting pressure on the lines. And we are about to play, if they don't trade, we're about to play d5. I don't know, queen somewhere. Well, they can, no, they check, it doesn't do anything, just gain a tempo with rook g2. So maybe queen d6, and I'm liking d5, yeah, for sure. We hit g7, that's over. Okay, you have to go back again to g8, not pleasant. And they've run out of checks, and we just keep on hitting that point until they really, no, queen f8, that's not going to work. Can't we just go bishop takes g7? I mean, we can liquidate, take on f8, and just take on g7. I think this should be good enough, no? Okay, well then we're going to have a queen against rook scenario. That's going to take a little longer. But if we just, I mean, we're just going to be up a rook. So that's just an easy, straightforward win. Bishop h6. Oh, and the bishop. We keep the bishop because we get the skewer now. That's nice. Okay. But that kind of gives you an idea, I think. I hope that would, show you how this can be won or this could be lost. White's overextended. Does that mean that white? Okay, there's a bunch of circles and things, but white's overextended. You might argue. It's always going to be a liability, right? Anytime you push, especially a G pawn, that's an interesting thing that I've talked about a few times. If you notice a G pawn, can we just get rid of all these? I think I have to go back. Okay, so if you notice a G pawn in particular, or a B pawn, well, the G pawn if you're castle kingside. When you move that G pawn, you've weakened significantly the squares on both the F file and the H file. It's just kind of the physics of the chessboard, the geometry. I guess the geometry of the chessboard is just the fact that when you move the G pawn, you can't defend H3. This you can't defend. Well, you already can't defend the pawn itself, by if it's on the second rank. But beyond that, if it goes to F3, you can't defend it here. Well, at least the G pawn can't defend any of these squares. The E pawn could do the trick. It can help a little bit. But in particular, the H file, right? The H file cannot be defended by anything. There's no I pawn, right? There's no I pawn to guard diagonally these squares. So these are going to be lethally weak the second you move that G pawn. That's why you should always watch out for G4. And well, okay, in this case, like if they wanted to play E, it just means that white has to be more cautious now, because if you ever play E4 and you've played G4, G5, okay, now you've really permanently weakened the F3 and the F4 squares as well as the natural weakness on F2. That's why, well, F2 and F7 are always weak because they're only guarded by the king at the beginning, no pawns, no other pieces. But yeah, it's just the weak squares. So keep that in mind. So that's a natural weakness on G5. Now, as to whether it's going to be exploited, well, that comes down to how you play for the most part. It's also about, look at the piece capability. Again, the pieces are aiming in, so it's super risky. The way I played is definitely risky, but as my coach growing up at Kobe, as he said, you gotta risk if you want to drink champagne. So in this case, I did want to drink some champagne, but sometimes I guess if you don't drink champagne, well, it may end up getting smashed on the ground or something. So in this case, that's pretty much what happened. Get smashed over my head, right? So queen g4 was just a clean way to nice clean move, right? You just covers all the weaknesses, simultaneously attacking e6, and it's just like a natural move. Now, as to how I fell for bishop, how I started going down this, no, I mean I was going for the knight, and it seemed like I just justified it, and I was also thinking, hey, I can go to g2, and I was like, the bishop h2 check problems were not there anymore, and I was quickly fooled by that. But again, it was just, misevaluation, some psychological features there that you got to be on the lookout for. And that was, maybe I've had a couple of psychological and thinking errors that have come up. Sometimes I forget those lessons and I have to relearn them. But I think writing them down on writing them down on cards or like notes on your phone, thinking, okay, these are the things that I need to do to deal with my own weaknesses, which is what I'm actually working on, writing a book about. So it's still kind of just drafting it right now, in the early stages. But yeah, hoping that I can get that done this year. But I think it's just such an important thing about knowing your own weaknesses, because no coach is going to tell you all your weaknesses. Only you know. You kind of like have to replay it in your mind. What were you thinking at that point in the game when you messed up? And yeah, just to be blunt about it, right? You messed up. Why did you mess up? Try to almost like think about your cognition at that point. And I remember my cognition, if I even now, yeah, just talking about some of the things I was worried about for my opponent and how I thought I had mitigated it, and then I sort of felt reassured. It was a false sense of reassurance. So yeah, it's just you don't want to see ghost threats. You got to make sure it's a ghost threat or not. But when they are real threats, you do have to be super cautious and be realistic about it. And but the whole thing about taking the knight was also sort of a distraction because I didn't need to go after the knight. I was almost getting greedy. That was another thing. It was sort of like the greed. You get the tendency to become greedy and say, um, I may as well pick up a pawn. Why not? Well, don't get distracted by pawns. You focus first and foremost position. Okay, if you can pick up a pawn for nothing, take it, but not if it compromises your position. Now, I mean, obviously leaving the king, that's a factor. That bishop is the guardian of the king, and it helps to mitigate some of those weaknesses left in the wake of the pawn pushing to g5. So, queen g4, that's just the way to go. I mean, okay, that's the computer's recommendation, but it does make a lot of sense. We can't say, okay, I should have played the computer move every single time. We got to be realistic, but still, then I would have been able to follow through on this idea. That's the line I really wanted when the knight gets stuck there on h5, and we could achieve that. That would be the ideal. Well, yeah, just a plus over minus. White has the advantage, and it's just the kind of thing like what would my opponent do? He's kind of stuck, right? And that's what he said. He said if you had played f4, if if you had played f4, very big if, then this is what I felt like I was just like lost basically. He was frank about it. I mean, what do, right? The knight can't go anywhere. A lot of positional features here, right? In terms of creating a bind. The Knight Capablanca games are great for that. Like the V is, look up V is for victory, where he pushes like this, but they're completely locked up. And but excellent demonstration. I actually did a video on that game. So yeah, this is tied down. This is tied down. The bishop is restrained. I mean, it may take a piece sack or something. Oh wait, it's saying knight c5. I don't know, maybe he has some piece sack. He has to try something. But his pieces are really bottled up at this point. Okay, my bishop's nothing to write home about, but still, it's there's still greater mobility and possibility in the position. It's gonna take some time. But again, that's kind of the bet I was making when I make a move like g5. Like it's not going to be perfect. There's going to, there's imbalances, right? Like someone talks about, you're creating imbalances. You don't get everything. Or like Fisher said, I think he said, you got to give squares to get squares, right? In this case, yeah, there are weaknesses, but at least my opponent's not kind of able to get behind that facade anytime soon. And in the meantime, I could at least, have that imbalance of extra space and activity. Oh, by the way, don't forget about the e6 pawn. That's not still under attack. And yeah, it would be kind of like, there's no breakthrough here, but it's more of you're looking for maybe something on the queen side. That's pretty much where it's going to have to come down to. Maybe you're going to be able to get, and bishop h3 can still target this one, and looking at maybe this take and pressure on the c file, or maybe pushing breaking through here. It's going to be hard to win for sure, but yeah, it's a lot better than what happened anyway. I'd have something to work with. That's always what I'm trying to get out of the opening. I want an imbalance, like in the Silman, in the Silman's thought, create imbalances, which is, of course, taken from many other ideas, but he condensed it well. Create imbalances actively, something to work with out of the opening. I don't care, whether it's I'm not partial to the bishop or the knight, or whether it's a double pawn or not. I don't care. I just want something that I can work with in my favor. So anyway, that was the goal, to have this, and that is what happened. And it was over. I mean, I forget exactly what happened after this. I don't have the rest of the game right here, but I think it was some capture like this, and then I had to take on h5, and it was just I somehow lost a piece. I think I had to play knight f1 or something, to stop queen g3. Yeah, because I also misevaluated this, I guess, because I didn't realize, I'm like, okay, maybe I have a defense here. But no, there's not a defense. Queen g3 is over, right? To get to g2, there's no way to stop that once that happens, because the bishop is so strong. It's amazing that leading bishop stops. So there's a lot of really cool attacking ideas in this game as well. So it's kind of a mix of art of defense in chess and art of attack in chess. YouTube version. Okay, so knight f1, and yeah, then I just dropped my bishop, and I tried to hold on for 15 moves, and I created some counterplay and stuff, because his knight didn't really get in the game for a while, and at least I didn't get mated right away, but he was just up a piece and breaking through with everything, and I tried to do something in the center, and he just, yeah, it just backfired. So I had to try, but 15, 20 moves, it was over. Yeah, but hopefully that was useful in terms of some of the psychological aspects, and just kind of venting about that game that I meant to do. um, but yeah, bishop f3 was, again, okay, here's how I'm going to label it. It's a superficial move. Bishop f3, just to be harsh with myself about it. It was a superficial move. A little greedy, going after the knight, and it's just kind of like, but again, it was rooted in a lot of things, though, like sort of lead ups to that. And I think there were other things. Actually, that night was, yeah, there was a lot of things on my mind too. So not as an excuse, but you have to have a clear mind for sure going into the game. And then, because otherwise it definitely leads to these types of psychological errors, whether you're short, for example, being short on time, not having a clear mind, getting affected by affected by your opponent somehow. So all those features, you can't let that affect you psychologically. You have to just be in this kind of, to find that consistency. You want to be in that consistent space. You had enough rest. You had enough food. You got your. Or Kramnik talks about eating dried fruits or something. Something to keep your brain, because sugars, keeping your brain going. Yeah. So what do they call it? Low glycemic, right? You gotta keep your brain going sustainably, and have enough water, things like that. And then just your basic, any psychological pitfalls you've ever noticed, by being self-aware, that you've noticed you've had in your games, you have to remove that. So I don't know if there's anyone who had a question, or if there's anyone that was even watching it, but let me double check. Sometimes I've missed that. So no, I don't think there were. Looks like okay, yeah, there were no questions, but yeah, I'm glad that I had it back. Got it going again. And yeah, it'll be become like a regular video, so you can watch later. And then if you have any questions, then I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can after you have those questions. But hopefully it would kind of speak to some of the things that have come up in your games as well, around like pushing pawns, because it is so tempting to push those kingside pawns, but it's all about how you do it. And it's like everything in chess. You have your theory, like that it might say, double pawns are good or bad, or double pawns are bad, I guess. But it comes down to the situation. So it's hard to say, definitively, it's good to push your G pawn. It's known as a bayonet attack, right? It's covered in art of attack in chess, and it's just a question of, is it good in this situation? And the whole of your chess experience will inform that. That builds your intuition to say, should I push G4, G5, or maybe the other way, B4, B5, the other bayonet. Should I go for that? Yeah, it's a weakening move fundamentally. It's weakening certain squares. but should I go for that or not? And that's going to be rooted in your intuition, your experience, what you've seen other players do. It's really strong players, how they handle that, as well as your understanding of that particular opening and variations, and just a really concrete analysis of the position before you. As with most things, like studying history, you can like political scientists, they love to make generalizations. But history tells you, okay, what's the unique scenario that gave rise to this historical moment, right? And you can try to draw from generalizations and theorists that try to pull from everything, create theories. But when it comes down to it, it's all about what's in front of you right now. You can throw out all the theory, orthodoxy out the window. That doesn't work at the end of the day, because you can borrow from it, borrow from different orthodoxies maybe that are informed by different schools of thought. But when it comes down to it, what's in front of you right now, what works for you right now. And anyway, I learned my lesson from that game. Hopefully, I won't repeat it anytime soon. And yeah, it's good to be back on again. And I'll probably do some streaming as well. So, and again, just stay healthy, everyone. Hopefully, we get through this soon. I know some people are saying it's not a big deal, but respiratory illnesses, especially for the elderly. But I mean, it's serious. We haven't lived through SARS and MERS and everything in the U.S., but other parts of the world definitely have, and they know it's serious. So, yeah, just stay healthy and play chess. Get a lot of chess in while you can. Okay.